Hello, I'm John O'Connell, Executive Chairman and founder of ScaleUp Group. And I'm delighted today to warmly welcome Matthew Elson in what is a series of talks with successful tech entrepreneurs with whom we have had an association along their journey. In this case, Matthew, you were our first ever client. Not sure that you knew that at the time. I had just created ScaleUp Group, building on my own entrepreneurial journey, advising tech entrepreneurs like yourself looking for Series A funding. Plus, as you know, we always co-invest, believing as we do in our clients. End of the plug. As you know, the purpose of our series of talks is for others to pick up from yourself and other successful entrepreneurs some key pointers for them to use on their journey, including avoiding pitfalls too, of course. But first things first, Matthew, perhaps you briefly explain your background pre-She Software, as it then was, before you rebadged as Evotix, please.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks very much for the invite to join the podcast. And yeah, happy to share my perspectives. Of course, every entrepreneur has a different journey, so hopefully people will take something useful from mine. So I had a varied background. I trained originally as an engineer, started out in manufacturing, spent some time in consulting, and then in various general management roles in smaller and larger businesses. And I even had a spell at number 10 Downing Street as transport policy advisor for Tony Blair. But over the 10 years or so before I acquired She Software, I'd been independent. So I had been doing sort of consulting and interim roles, and I wound up as interim CEO of a private equity held business, which we sold. And the partners in that fund said to me, well, look, so what next, Matthew? And I said, well, I guess more of the same, more consulting and interim roles. But I told them that I've always been on the lookout for a business to buy without ever super actively searching, just kind of keeping my ear to the ground. I looked at one or two things, but they said, look, so why don't you take a look at She Software, which was another of the properties in the fund. Yeah, I took it from there.
And you always wanted to buy because you wanted to personally own something. Was that your thinking?
So I guess I'd been a general manager, and then I'd become a chief executive. I was independent. I was kind of enjoying that independence. And I guess owning a business is one stage more of independence from being a chief executive. So when you become a chief executive, of course, you have a lot of discretion over how you run the business, but ultimately it has owners and stakeholders and a board to manage. For me, it was kind of logical from there to say that I want my own business. And I guess I'm not the kind of entrepreneur who has millions of ideas of businesses that they could start. But I was confident that I knew how to run businesses, and therefore kind of acquiring a business for me made more sense.
Understood. Right. So the headlines, please, Matthew. When you started, what was its revenue, its headcount at that time?
Yeah, so the business was small and troubled. It was in commercial dispute with the largest customer, which was a third of the revenues. And so when the partner said, well, why don't you take a look at She Software, the subtext was nobody else wants it. So lots of people looking, but nobody buying because of the commercial dispute. So I was lucky enough to take it off their hands for the proverbial £1. Obviously, initially, therefore, was a deep turnaround. So the business that I acquired, 10 staff, 500,000 turnover, as I say, a third of that revenue in commercial dispute. What I saw was a good market, and apparently a decent product, because they had a bunch of customers, maybe not at the right price, but they had a bunch of customers. But it was the kind of turnaround where you need to grow the top line quickly in order to stabilize the business. And so, my initial actions were resolve the commercial dispute. There's a whole story around that, but just very briefly, that was with a company called Mace. Most listeners probably know that that's a big kind of construction project management company. They had basically redesigned our software, but were in a permanent contract with us. So we sued them for 1.8 million. They sued us for 11 million. We had a face-off across a mediation table and got a small settlement, which was sufficient to keep the business afloat. And then I put in place initial sales and marketing capability that stabilized the business and got some initial growth, which kept us alive.
And had you done any in-depth DD at that moment, or particularly with that dispute? Had you had a kind of face-to-face with them before you decided to acquire the business?
No. I mean, I think when you buy a business for £1, you kind of know that you're going in with it, warts and all, and you kind of back yourself up to face up to the challenges that you come across.
Presumably, you'd allowed yourself a budget for how much you personally might need to inject by way of working capital.
Yeah, no, of course. So, it's £1 cash-free, debt-free. So obviously needed working capital, and we'll come a little bit to the growth story. But over the first 7 years that I owned the business, before we took venture capital funding, I was drip feeding in funds, and in fact ended up lending the business half of my pension, which obviously is a big step. So I funded it to the tune of maybe sort of £500,000 before we took external investment.
Yeah, very good. So 10 heads, I think you said $500,000 in revenue, and then when you sold Evotix in due course, what were the figures then?
So strictly speaking, the exit number is confidential, but let's say that it's a 9-figure sum, so in the over 100 million, and we had grown to 150 heads.
Over 100 million versus £1. That's not a bad return for your bravery, is it? And
it's quite a good IRR, I think. Yes. Yeah. I mean, obviously, at exit, we'd taken a couple of rounds of VC funding, so I was sort of largest shareholder, but a minority by that point.
Yeah, regrettably, myself and my colleagues didn't invest also at the valuation of £1 in those days because we didn't know you then. so well done you. So did you have any specific goals in mind when you first took it on, or was it really a leap in the dark, see how it goes, and if it doesn't work out, I'll do something else type of thing?
Well, it was kind of a leap in the dark. I mean, it was presented to me actually by the private equity partner as, this is kind of a pension investment. So their vision for the business was get a little bit of growth, stabilize it. It should throw off 200,000 a year of cash. So, I mean, I went in, it was a shot in the dark, right? Because I didn't know anything about IT. And I didn't know anything about health and safety when I bought the business. So, whilst I could evaluate that there appeared to be a good market, there was a limit to what I knew about this kind of business. But I guess from my consulting background, I'd worked with all kinds of businesses and was used to getting up to speed quickly. And so, it was a journey. I soon realized I saw the potential in the business, but I soon realized that actually this is not a pension investment, right? This is a business that can really grow. And so in the initial couple of years, I continued with my consulting and interim work, left the existing team in place. I was sort of an executive chairman role. But I realized there was more potential and that the existing team wasn't going to get us there. So after a couple of years, sort of prompted by one of our external advisors, I took over as chief executive and took the business forward from there.
In that period, pretty scary stuff, really. Did you have any person or people you bounced your thoughts off before making those commitments, or was it purely a a solitary midlife crisis?
Yeah, I don't think it was a midlife crisis. I mean, I've always had that sort of entrepreneurial gene somewhere, because I've always massively admired entrepreneurs and maybe been a bit jealous of sort of people that I've met who have had their own businesses. So it was always in the mix for me, but it's still a big step. I remember sitting at the table in the back garden with Kathy, my partner. And I frequently repeat this story because she was saying, under no circumstances are you to buy this business. Far too risky. We absolutely don't want to do it. And she knows that if I'm determined to do something, then generally speaking, that's where I go. So I think she may have changed her tune now that we've had a good exit. But then I also took advice from other kind of business colleagues that I was networked with, and actually in that initial purchase of the business, I also teamed up with a small go-to-market consultancy who kind of helps me through those first stages of putting in place a go-to-market motion. So I had that set of advice as well.
So an independent listener might decide that you took advice for those whose advice you felt was okay, what you wanted to hear, and you didn't from those where they didn't agree with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could have that discussion with Kathy, I guess, but no, but I think external advice is super important, right? And this is part of the journey.
Yeah.
So, one of the keys to success in my mind is building up that network of external advisors and supporters for the business. Your job as CEO, as the entrepreneur, is to take the decisions, right? You don't always have to take the advice, but it's always good to listen to the advice, consider it carefully, and frankly, the external support and advice that we've had along the way has been absolutely invaluable to the success of the business.
Yeah. Great. Well, so you start on the journey. After a couple of years, you decided that you had to, as it were, get your hands dirty and actually start leading from the front, so to speak. And was that the first of what I believe might have been a number of different management changes you made over the years?
Yes, that was the first management change. I think we'll perhaps come back to this point in terms of overall learnings, but getting the right team in place for the different parts of the journey is super important. But the other things that were happening there early in the journey, right? So when I acquired the business, I could see there was already a degree of product market fit, right? We had 150 customers. Okay, fine. They were only paying £3,000 a year each. But we replatformed the product to latest technology, essentially keeping pretty similar functionality, but dealing with all that tech debt and making the platform scalable. And then we had an extensive focus on kind of defining and scaling the go-to-market. So getting the right talent in place, what's the right messaging, what are our business processes for the go-to-market, and that's really been a continuous journey, still is. And again, that's one of my messages is you're never done, right? There's always more stuff to do. And then in those early days, the other big challenge stroke priority was, of course, cash, right? We were bootstrapped, always looking carefully at cash, figuring out what we could do, where we could invest.
I just realised, Matthew, that we haven't actually specified when that was. When you first took over. I'm talking about early days. What period are we talking about?
Yeah, so I bought the business in 2011.
Yeah. Okay.
I took over as chief executive in 2014. We took our first round of external capital. John, you'll know this. I think, was it 2017 or 2018?
It was, and then we started in 17 and
17, right? And then exited in 2023 to private equity.
Yeah. So that's like a 12-year journey, which is probably twice as long as you've thought it would be.
Well, and you know, and we'll come to that as well because it's 12 years so far. I'm still chief executive now with private equity backers.
Okay, very good. So you decided you had product market fit. Did you have already a proven go-to-market strategy?
No, well, as I say, that's kind of been a work in progress. You know, when I acquired the business, they had a website, right? Some customers found them on the website. They sold at a low price and had a bunch of customers that way.
And it was a SaaS business then, was it already?
Was already a pure play SaaS business, and so what I mean by that is multi-tenanted. Everybody's on the same code base, deliver the functionality via configurable solution, which, as I say, we re-platformed. You know, just to give you a sense of that. So, as I say, when I acquired the business, average ACV £3,000. Currently across the business, average ACV £35,000. So a tenfold increase in the average that customers are paying, which reflects a number of things. One, of course, the improvement in the product over time. Two, our better ability to articulate the value to customers and you know to engage with customers in that go-to-market process.
Yeah. I think one of the themes I've noticed in talking with clients is not quite often our clients do underprice their product relative to the value they're delivering, and you know, I know we've had a couple of discussions around the table at our CEO forums, but you know, land and expand, which is a whole subject in itself, you know, I think is a valid justification for having a relatively low entry price, so long as your pricing structure allows for you expanding once you have landed. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you know, growing a startup business is scrappy. So you need to get the logos on board, and you know, sometimes you need to be you know, pretty keen on price, certainly in the initial stages, to start to kind of get market entry, to develop the referenceability, et cetera. But I think it's a mistake to underprice the solution, right? Because actually what I've found is that if you engage properly with customers, articulate the value, understand their requirements, build a great solution that fits, that actually drives much stronger long-term retention. So sometimes if you go in too cheap, then the customer thinks it's cheap and it's, you know, kind of easy to switch out. So I think going in at a decent price, you know, demonstrates customer commitment. And then we're lucky that we've got a modular solution, and so you know, our initial sale might be, it's a health and safety business. I don't think we've talked about that yet, John, but so it's a health and safety software business, and you know, maybe an initial sale is incidents, risk, and audit, but then we've got another sort of half a dozen modules and other pieces of functionality that we can then offer to those customers to drive that expansion.
That's a key point. It's so often there's been a health and safety incident, which is the trigger. I'm getting the impression from you for the initial purchase, but then it goes much broader than that to prevention and health and safety practices generally. Is that a fair description?
Well, there are different reasons why customers buy. It can be because they've had an incident, and those deals tend to go through quite quickly, and we would call those a sort of a top-down deal, right? So the board has said, "Man, this is an incident. We're clearly not in control here, right? We need to get ourselves sorted out." But actually, if you think about a health and safety solution, and you know, kind of our pitch, if you're responsible for health and safety, you need to kind of record, investigate your incidents, understand your risks and mitigations, make sure your people are trained, assets are inspected, contractors are competent, etc. Lots of customers still doing that with pen and paper, Excel spreadsheets. It's clearly inefficient. It's hard to demonstrate that you're compliant, and you can't really learn anything from your data. So ours is a system of record that drives that efficiency, can prove compliance, powerful BI to slice and dice the data, but also a great mobile app, because the key to driving improvement in health and safety is getting technology in every employee's hands. And so our mobile app is used by every employee to access key safety information, to record incidents, near misses, hazards, etc.
A couple of points from that. Is it often a grudge purchase of your software because they have to comply, rather than feeling that they ought to be looking after people? And second point really is, has there ever been, or is there, the proverbial burning platform which causes customers to look for a solution such as yours?
I don't know that I would articulate it as a grudge purchase. That's quite strong sort of language. Compliance is clearly an issue, and actually more so in the North America market than the UK market. But actually, most kind of forward-looking businesses recognize that good health and safety is an essential component of their operations, right? I mean, there are, of course, as we said, there's efficiency, there's compliance, but there's also reputational things. So, if you are known to have a poor safety record, maybe you're a supplier and you can't, you need to demonstrate good safety performance to your customers, for your employees, and the reputation in the market, like for morale, etc. And so, but also safety, right, is a core operational discipline. So if you think about what does good operations look like, right, it means that I am planning carefully, I'm measuring non-conformances, I'm taking corrective actions, I'm planning continuous improvement. Those are all safety disciplines, but they're also operational disciplines. And so, forward-looking customers are positioning safety at the heart of their core operations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so there wasn't one act or incident which caused trigger in demand for you. It was overall appealing to the more forward-looking organizations, as you said. Now, you touched upon the US being more aware of the need than perhaps elsewhere. So was international part of your original thinking? Or if not, how did it come about?
Yeah, not originally, John. I guess partly because I didn't initially have that ambition for the business. We were prompted quite early by my first sales manager, who had a good couple of years, but then was struggling. Said that we were capped out in the UK market, and maybe I didn't apply the diligence that I should have done to that statement. But we went and had a look at Australia, and we kind of accidentally won a big contract in New Zealand. And so we kind of ended up in Australia, New Zealand. This is back in 2014, right? So only 3 years in. Maybe the business was turning over 1.5, 2 million at the time. So really very early for that international expansion. So with, I say that was a little bit accidental, but with hindsight, probably quite useful, because we kind of cut our teeth there a little bit. And then when we decided to enter North America, which was 2017, that was a very deliberate move. We at least had some insight into what that journey might be. And if you remember, that was why we went for VC funding, because we knew that, we needed to make that investment. And I mean, it's a long journey, especially with the US market, right? It's a big market, lots of opportunity, but going in as a UK business, you go in with no referenceability, no brand recognition, and it's just a long journey to start to make your mark in the market, and get to a decent level of performance. We can probably talk a little bit further about those challenges if you think that's interesting for the listeners.
I think it definitely would be. Every client we work with is their goal is US entry. So I think it comes down to not if, but when, frankly, for pretty much all of them. I do recall those early days. And in fact, I think that's how we justified that, what was then an EIS style investment, because the age of the business at that time, I don't think that knowledge intensive rule was around then. But we could, with the help of an advisor, I'll give Philip here a plug here. He said you can carve out a new opportunity, in which case you would qualify for EIS stroke VCT. And at the time, if I remember, you had a person in Chicago who was evaluating opportunities for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, so John, you've got a better memory of me of that particular part of the journey. But so we had a contractor in Chicago, and before committing to US market entry, I'd been to some trade shows with him. We'd had good conversations on the stand, right? So we had a sense that there was decent product market fit. But of course, that's different to kind of successful market entry. My first hire actually in the States was our global VP talent. And I knew we've always had a very strong talent dimension, but I knew also that hiring talents in the US was challenging. And so she came on board. When I say she was our first hire, perhaps I should have had her and then sort of waited 2 or 3 months. But we also then had a couple of salespeople come on board, not sourced by Kimberly, our global VP talent. And I guess this is a very common story for US market entry, right? First sales team absolutely did not work out. I don't know that I've got any fantastic advice for people. It's very difficult, I think, for Europeans to evaluate kind of our colleagues in the US, because we have a different style of presenting ourselves. And so you have to kind of put that very strong filter and understand that, our US colleagues are frankly, much better at articulating their strengths and, prone to, well, exaggeration is too strong a word, but they kind of give a very fulsome account of themselves, and especially salespeople, right? Salespeople, their job is to sell and to tell stories, and so very difficult to evaluate. And we got that first team wrong. And I'm not sure that I've got a solution to that one beyond what everybody else says, which is be very, very careful and aware of that pitfall. And then of course, we've moved on to sort of a new team, and it's been a journey, but we've got ourselves to a great place, and we've got a strong growing North America business. You just with all things as an entrepreneur, right? You need persistence, you need determination. You need to be able to pivot if things are not quite working, and we got ourselves to a good spot.
Yeah, so well, top marks for that. And you were very diplomatic about some of the descriptions of US sales people, but they can, as you said, there's a genuine cultural difference, which can be very misleading when you're hiring. And I do also speak with some hard-won experiences there, and we did use some underhand methods in the end to try and evaluate people, which some worked out, some didn't, which I don't think would pass muster these days. I mean, my starting point with some of the companies I've been chairing who have had US ambitions is to say, well, either you, Mr. or Mrs. Founder, you should go there, or if not you, then part of a member of your inner circle, because otherwise you're getting feedback filtered from a perspective which may not be the right one. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's good advice. In the first 2 or 3 years that we were in the States before COVID, I was spending a third of my year in the States, and so I didn't transfer there because tax complications, but we're certainly spending a good chunk of time there, which was sufficient to get a good feel for things and to sort of to redirect the business as we needed to.
Yeah, well done. And roughly, how much of your business now is US versus the rest?
It's still a relatively low proportion, maybe sort of 20%.
Okay,
but
right.
in terms of growth, in EMEA, maybe well in UK and Ireland, we're the dominant player, so we're kind of growing maybe sort of 15 to 20% per annum. But in the US, we're growing over 100% per annum.
Oh, very good. I'm looking at the time here, but we haven't touched at all on competition. You referred to the earlier stages where the alternative was spreadsheets, etc. Did you ever have any direct competition?
Yeah,
I'm thinking also in the States as well.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's a pretty competitive market. As I say, in UK and Ireland, we've got ourselves to a dominant position, which is great, and that just makes the whole kind of go-to-market and sort of marketing process easier. In the US, yeah, there's a fair degree of competition, and so you're always trying to figure out how to position yourself and generate an edge.
Right. I know the whole people and cultural aspect of your business is very important to you, especially. But again, perhaps you could just summarize your approach and what the consequences were of you being sensitive to that over the years.
Yeah, so I mean, people is absolutely the core pillar for any kind of tech business, and I guess culture. It took us some time, so because I inherited a business, right, which already, although small, already had a degree of culture to it. And with the business that I acquired was based in East Kilbride, just south of Glasgow. Relatively parochial perspective on the world. I think purpose has been very central to getting our culture and kind of our people on board. So, I mean, how can it be well into the 21st century that we're still killing 5,000 people a year in workplaces in Europe and North America? And it's not like these are some freak accidents, right? These are well-known causes: hit by moving vehicles, caught in machinery, falling from height. And what's more, we're exposing a lot of that risk to some of the least advantaged in society, so people who are in precarious employment on low incomes, right? So our values, our perspective is that is not acceptable, and so our purpose is to help our customers to use technology to have impact on those terrible statistics. And so that purpose, very, very strong as something that kind of knits our team together. And in terms of recruitment, right, people really, that purpose really resonates. And then we built strong values. We formally articulated our values 3 years ago. And rather than go through a process of trying to work out what our values were, it was very much an articulation of our existing values, and you can see those on our website. They're not your average corporate values, right? And so they are things like willing to contend, be our best selves, and just try it. And we use those values day in, day out in the business. So when people give one another high fives, they will hashtag it with one of our values and how that person has exhibited that value. And so kind of that kind of strong culture, alignment, energy takes time to build, right? You've got to be quite purposeful about how to get there, I think. But for us, that is a very strong pillar of the business and driving a lot of our success.
And cynics, before they heard you articulate, you might think, well, this is one of these kind of apple pie and motherhood things which corporates do because it seems like the right thing, but clearly from the way you've described it, this is something you truly believe in, you and your colleagues, and you live it day in, day out. And so very impressive. And of course, saving lives does concentrate the mind, doesn't it? And of course, that horrible statistic of 5,000 people dying must mask a number of people seriously injured. I mean, presumably is a multiplier of that each year. So I get it. You're improving society and keeping people safer. So what greater purpose? So top marks to you and your team on that one. Jumping more up to date, Matthew, in terms of where you are today. You went through a corporate sale process. Now, I'm very interested as an entrepreneur myself. What caused you to think now is the time? So that's a kind of philosophical point, and then the practical one. What process did you go through to achieve what seems like a very successful outcome?
Yeah, sure. So the timing was, I guess that there's been a number of transactions in our space, some consolidation, and in particular, where are we now? In early 2022, there was one of our major kind of EMEA competitors was acquired. And so as a result of that, there were a bunch of disappointed buyers in the market. And so a lot of interest in our sector. So we decided to talk to some advisors. This was initiated by Frog, who were our B round investors. I've sold a couple of businesses, but with very ad hoc processes. And so Frog were instrumental in helping to set up a very structured process. So we took advice from external advisors, and I guess the advice said, right, either you should sell now, or you need to grow the US business to at least $10 million. Which obviously, that was kind of still a 2 or 3 year journey out. And so we decided that we would go to market in sort of mid 2022. On the face of it, not great market timing. But as I say, there'd been a number of transactions and there were disappointed buyers out there. And so we appointed William Blair as our advisors. And they took us through a very full sales process, developing all of our materials. We did vendor side due diligence, as in we paid to assemble a set of due diligence materials with external parties. We had William Blair. We already had a long book of potential acquirers, because we'd had a lot of inbound interest, and we were publishing a quarterly newsletter to those potential buyers. And I think that's an important part of the process, by the way. In advance of selling, right? If you have told a bunch of acquirers, this is where we're at and these are our plans, and then 3 months, 6 months later, you say we've fulfilled our plans and this is our next plans, and you repeat that process, then you kind of build up a good degree of confidence in the market, that when you come to sell and you say these are our plans, they've got some real credibility behind them. And so we've been doing that. We had a long list of our own contacts. William Blair also very well networked across the industry. We ended up, John, doing 58 fireside chats with potential acquirers over about a kind of a 6-week period, so pretty intensive. We had 11 indicative offers. We selected 4 of those for parallel due diligence with a 2-week deadline. And at the end of the 2 weeks, we chose the buyer.
Well, that's very impressive. 58, 11, 4, and a very sprightly timetable. That because sometimes these things can meander, can't they? And everyone gets a bit tired with the process, loses enthusiasm. Someone said to me, time kills deals. So it sounds like you kept it very sharp the whole period, but that must have consumed a massive amount of your personal time.
Yeah, no, it was very intensive. And so again, well, I don't think we talked about team, other than saying that it's very important, but I think assembling the right team for us has been central. When you're growing a business at 40% plus per annum, what I say to my leadership team is you better be growing fast if you're going to keep up.
Yeah.
And we may come back to this, although I think we're nearly out of time. But when I recruit for the leadership team, of course, you want to recruit for people who are a good fit now, but it's also very important to recruit for potential, right? So people who are curious, people who are learning fast. And so great interview question I find is what have you learned in the last 6 months and applied to your role? Anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but suffice it to say that I had a great leadership team, and therefore I and the CFO could step out of the business essentially for 6 months, and the business ran itself to a large degree, right? We continued to hit our numbers. We maintained that momentum, and that's obviously essential to a good sale.
Yeah. Well, I do recall you saying at one of our CEO forums that none of the original team members had survived the journey. So that's quite a tough thing as a leader, isn't it, to actually lose people along the way who've done their level best but just can't hack it to the next stage. So that's but you managed clearly to do that, and results are evident that you were able to do a proper process, as you say. So you've sold the business, but remain in the large business. What next for you?
Yeah, so as you say, John, I'm the CEO. So the actual transaction we carried out, we were acquired by a business called SAI 360, which had just been acquired by STG. So STG are the private equity owners, West Coast private equity company. They'd acquired SAI 360. Within SAI 360, which is a governance, risk, and compliance business, they had a health and safety solution. And the vision was to carve out that EHS business, combine it with Evotix, and stand up Evotix as a separate portfolio company with a focus on health and safety. And so over the last 12 months, we've been busy doing a simultaneous kind of acquisition and carve out of that EHS business. And so now we are a business of 300 staff and north of 40 million turnover, and still growing fast. So there's plenty to do in that. So I'm still learning a lot. A huge amount, right? Understanding the private equity world, which is a little bit different to the kind of venture world. At some point in the future, I've got a social venture in mind, and I'm also looking forward in due course to giving back and kind of advising others on the journey.
Which, of course, is a very nice segue. Thank you, Matthew, for the fact that you recently joined us at ScaleUp Group as an equity partner, and which means you can no doubt pass on your hard-won experience and achievement knowledge to some of our clients, which I'm sure they'll be phenomenally appreciative of. And what you said today is revealing of that. So, Matthew, thank you so much for your candor and willingness to share your experiences. Not too many warts, actually. So well done with that. I know that entrepreneurs out there will have found this most illuminating. And so on behalf of ScaleUp Group and its clients, absolutely delighted that you're going to retain an involvement with us over time. And now thanks to our audience for tuning in. I hope you've found this informative and encouraging from, let's say, somewhat humble £1 beginnings in Matthew's case to becoming arguably one of the leading exponents of a solution globally. Certainly, as you said, Matthew, #1 in UK and Ireland. So tremendous achievements, which I'm sure you're very quietly proud of. And Kathy now forgives you for not listening to her early on. Thanks once again, Matthew, and have a good day. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, John, and yeah, great to join, as you say, the ScaleUp Group partners, and yeah, looking forward to hopefully helping other entrepreneurs on their journey. Thank you.
Great, thank you.